It's time for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Craig, some people are starting to say that Washington, D.C. seems to be more like Moscow than the United States capital that we've known and loved. And I guess it just begs the question about how silent the resistance has been to these remarkable moves by Donald Trump. And I would love to have both of you comment on this new era.
Well, it may be challenging. I don't think it's quite as bad as Moscow yet for a number of reasons, although I think the reality is we have a president who admires strong, in some ways, dictatorial leaders and believes in issuing executive orders as the law of the land, and they're not. Look, we're only five weeks into all this, but Trump has thrown out a whole lot of edicts, most of which are either being held up in the courts or bogged down, or literally or in some cases withdrawn altogether. So I think you really can't judge this in the eye of the storm, if you will. I think it's going to be something that we're going to have a better handle on come summer. I personally think that you're already seeing peaceful opposition to a list of actions that is increasingly disruptive, is not in total addressing the kinds of issues that Trump ran on and theoretically won on, like cost of goods and inflation. And I think that, the majority of Americans don't view chaos as a good thing and are having a hard time understanding what the administration is doing. So I really think you're seeing some protests. I personally believe we're going to have a very challenging summer. I think you'll see a lot of people coming out as members of Congress go home for town halls and other things. I think they're going to hear from people who are very upset. And some of those people will, in fact, be Republicans who are, wondering why they're getting what they're getting and not what they thought they were voting for. So I'm a little more in the mind that as disruptive as this is, as damaging as it is and will be in many ways, there are consequences to these actions, and there are going to be reverberations in the weeks ahead, much louder, much stronger than what we're seeing so far.
Al, I mean, you sense this shadow, this cloud over D.C. at this point?
I basically agree with where Craig is. Stuff happens here a lot. We're in a very polarized environment. Trump has, the one thing he's good at is sort of dominating the airwaves and the media, and so he's put the Democrats, I think, on their heels in how to respond, because it's always been a problem when you're the out party to deal with the president. Trump is particularly good at the media, and with the help of Elon Musk, probably more on X and the social media platforms or anything else, really can dominate in a way. I mean, when we had to fight Craig and Ronald Reagan when I was in the House leadership in the first Reagan term, it took a while. We went out around the country and tried to build fires around the country that then sort of burned up, and we saw a good election for Democrats in 1982. Well, in today's world, that seems like it's not even happening because it's such a slow pace. And, Carville said this week, I think, that Democrats ought to just sit back, let Trump destroy himself. I don't think that's right. I think his major political point is right, that Trump will destroy himself, but, in using the courts and wherever they can in Congress, in the Senate, using the filibuster, you to try to block the worst things that he's doing. Realistically, when when you're going to really see the resistance is when people are going crazy, and it affects the Republicans because the Republicans pull all the levers. And, right now, Trump can vote with the Russians in the UN, and the Republicans won't say a goddamn thing. I mean, I can't imagine what Craig feels like, having been with the administrations that ended the Cold War, and now, Trump wants to switch sides. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so bizarre. Dave, I think there's an answer to your question that maybe that might help people understand a little bit more what's going on. In Washington and in the interest groups and sort of the Washington community, everybody responds to inputs. So everything that Trump says, when he says he's going to cut programs, when he says he's going to do this and that, people, for the interest groups in the Washington community, that's their life. So that's what they respond to. But the real response that's going to change things are the outcomes. And so when the programs actually go and get into place, he will pay more for his tardiness in trying to deal with bird flu than he will for all of this screaming about, what George Wallace would have called pointy-headed bureaucrats. But if these programs and the damage, and the cuts are is irrationally done as we think they are, and have the impact we think they will, then over the next few months, people are going to feel it. And that's when the resistance will really begin.
Like, the other thing that came up in the last day or so is that, Musk joined a cabinet meeting. I guess it was the first cabinet meeting that President Trump has called. And Trump reiterated that those who had not corresponded with, the Musk agency about what they had done in the last week would be fired, which turns out to be 1 million people have not completed that exercise. I mean, how do you process all that?
I'm not as morose as my friend Al might think. I honestly think this kabuki dance in the cabinet room and in the White House is, all going to get lost in the noise. I totally agree that the consequences of cuts, when they affect real people in real ways, will have a very deleterious effect on the administration. We'll see. Yeah. What I worry about more than some of the theatrics at the White House relate to the consequences of having what I really think, and the cabinet room reminded me of it, kind of a farm league team. We're playing in a world where we have world-class competition from the Russians, from the Chinese, from Iranian intelligence forces, from ISIS, from the Taliban, from internal threats. We are going to face as a nation a challenge. I don't have any special intelligence that tells me that. I just know that every president is tested by those I just named. And there is no, agent for any of those forces sitting in the United States, and there are many, who aren't getting ready to see what they can accomplish. And when you cut back and totally disregard the skills of, FBI agents and intelligence forces and all of that, you're just asking for trouble. And trouble is going to come. And you look around that cabinet room, and those people are not ready. And then you have what's going to, I think, be a real upheaval over the summer about the consequences of cuts, the rising prices, maybe a falling stock market, and who there is the kind of stable genius, to use a phrase, that we're going to turn to for confidence. I really think that part of the art of building a strong presidency, which I firmly believe in, actually, regardless of party, the art is developing a governing majority. The art is taking your base and expanding it. The art is being able to communicate to the majority of Americans, not just to the 30% who are going to seemingly respond favorably no matter what you do. And I think for Trump, that's shrinking. The antics of Musk, an unelected person, are already getting criticized by Republicans in the legislature. They're getting criticized by governors, Republicans and Democrats across the land. So if he loses a governing majority, if he loses the majority of Americans who have some reason to believe that they might be better off with Trump's leadership, I just don't know how they're going to come back from that. And so ultimately, those who are frustrated, those who are worried, those who are scared, it is ultimately up to voters to make a decision and start sending signals and then vote next year on whether this is the kind of leadership they want. I think that there is very little being done to broaden the base or to build a governing majority.
Al, you have the last word this week.
This whole deal seems to be guided by, anger and retribution and no rational way, no sense of purpose. And so it's going to end up badly one way or another. I looked at the cabinet show. I didn't spend a lot of time. I was up in New York yesterday and didn't see a lot of the news. I wasn't glued to CNN like I often am. It sure seemed to me like it was a television production, which is everything he's doing. He wants to live in a world of illusion, but the problem is illusion at some point for people becomes reality.
Yeah.
The price of eggs is now $8 a dozen. That affects a lot of people. We had a measles death in Texas. We have a worse than a normal flu season. What does our Secretary of HHS do? He stops the advertising campaign for flu vaccines. I mean, these are things that can have real consequences. The measles outbreak is, I think I saw last night, and going now into 9 states. Now, it's not widespread, but you have an anti-vaxxer. When the vaccine has almost eliminated measles. This whole question of order and disorder, I mean, that's what immigration was that now, but Trump's chaos is what, people like to live an orderly life. Just remember that what brought Trump down last time was one, we had a crisis, and as Craig said, they weren't up to the crisis, and they had people in the last administration that are a hell of a lot better than they've got in this one. People got tired of the disorder in their living room. The reality show had a run of a few months, and this one will too. But at some time, his ratings are going to go down. And but I just really think when things settle in, that Trump's support will go down. You'll find some Republicans who will finally muster up the courage to defend the country a little bit, and hopefully, and I say this hopefully, my party will actually begin to develop some alternatives so people will have something reasonable to turn on.
Maybe I'll use this as a postscript, Al, but when do we start seeing the Democrats in a much higher profile than they are now? I mean, it's really kind of remarkable that we still don't have a couple of senior Democratic leaders during this time speaking out.
Well, I think you're going to see it happen. Governor Gavin Newsom announced a podcast yesterday, which he's going to use for that purpose. Strategically, and this is me, but it's one of the reasons Clinton was president, is you got to be wise on how you respond. And trying to chase every crazy thing that Trump and Musk does would probably help them more than it would help us. To be honest with you, if I see Elizabeth Warren screeching in front of a building of some agency that nobody really understands or cares about, that isn't helpful. What is helpful is to have realistic alternatives, to be able to look at things as they develop and come up with alternative ways to do things. And that takes time. I mean, we have this penchant in today's world that everything has to be done in 30 seconds. I mean, you go on X or, whatever platform, and you type something up with 180 letters and you click it, and that's the response. No, the response is going to be, and the election is not on March 1st, okay? The election is next November. And the way you build a strategic response is to build one so that next November, people are going to say, we don't want this guy anymore.
I would just add that there's also a Washington adage that goes, if you see somebody digging themselves into a deep hole, don't take away the shovel. And honestly, I couldn't agree with Al more. Wait until the consequences of some of these things hit. Actions taken, speeches given in March or April of this year are not going to be remembered next year. I do think a difficult summer will be remembered. I also think that between the courts, so legal actions that slow down some of this craziness are going to yield even more questions about why the administration was trying to do these things, and some of the action that's already taking effect. So I don't know that there's no action, but I think that even for Republicans right now to step out, it may be just too soon. I think however, it's not going to be too soon by the time you get to summer and into late this year, and because that will make more and more elected officials nervous about the prospect of reelection in 2026. And once they get nervous about that, some things are going to change.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thanks so much indeed. We will see you next week.